Providence, I want to remind us during this time of one of our goals for the year as a church was to really put an emphasis on really trying to ignite a prayer movement within our congregation. And we spoke a number of times on this issue over the first 3 months of the year. And now we've had this unusual kind of once in a lifetime happen here with the pandemic. And we just believe it's time to actually press really into prayer, and that this is a time, even though we can't formally meet together in a prayer meeting, where we actually still pray together and love God together as a group. So I take great inspiration from church history where at unique times God's people came together in prayer and they saw something great happen. And I like how my friend John Tyson talks about, and he's a pastor in New York, and he talks about the stages that we go through in our Christian life. And you start off as a believer, and it's mainly personal, right? It's regeneration and your personal sanctification. But then it moves into like, hey, I'm part of a body here, and that church bodies actually go through this stage of spiritual attention and sensitivity. And he would say that there's often a time of reformation in the church, and then that moves to a time of renewal. And Providence was born in this space of renewal. It was part of this church planting movement. And how can the church really be the church in culture today? But then John says that it goes beyond that to revival. Revival is this increased manifestation of the Spirit's work in our lives as a body of people. And I think that's what we're striving for here at Providence, is this fresh wind of the Spirit that would then lead to, as Tyson frames it out, into an awakening. And there's a movement afoot across the world right now asking for there to be another great awakening within culture. So we're just one congregation in one neighborhood in one city in this broad and beautiful world. But I want us to really press into this issue of revival. And it basically comes down to this: is, do you want more of God? Do you want more of God in your life? And I think Christianity seems to thrive the best in difficult situations. Well, we live in the West, and our problems are just at a whole different level than other people's problems because we live in a culture of wealth and provision. So it's even more important for us to realize that maybe perhaps we've been overwhelmed by the desires of the world, and it's time for us to really detox that and seek the Lord and want more of God in our lives. And so I think this pandemic gives us the conditions in which we're listening to God on a different level. I want to hearken back to a church history story where the prayer meeting that I talked about here a month or two ago was the prayer meeting that started as a 24-hour prayer movement, and it lasted for 100 years. And that was with Count Zinzendorf in Germany. And basically, the church had gone through some division. They finally came together around issues of being together in unity. And then this prayer meeting was launched, and he basically set up 24 single men and 24 single women, and they began this hourly intercession. And they would actually have these letters that the church leaders would write that became the subject of the prayer hours. And that, by the way, birthed the Moravians, and the Moravians still have the #1 best-selling Christian devotional that they publish one every year, and they sell 1.5 million copies of it. That movement is still going because a church of about the size of Providence Bible Church got together and became serious about prayer. So we are following in the footsteps of our spiritual forefathers in wanting to seek this kind of revival. And you never know what happens. What most people may not be aware of is that John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, was actually on a ship, and he saw how it was a ship full of German people and English people, and the German citizens on the boat were mainly the Moravians, and they were known for their acts of service on the ship, and that they actually had these church services. And Wesley even talks in his own writings, and he says, if these people were pushed, struck, or thrown down, they rose again and went away, but no complaint was found in their mouth. And then one time in the midst of a psalm, when they began their service, the sea broke over, it split the mainsail in pieces, it covered the ship, and it poured in between the decks, as if the great deep had already swallowed us up. A terrible screaming began among the English, but the Germans calmly sang on. I asked one of them afterwards, "Was you not afraid?" He said, I thank God, no. I asked, but were not your women and children afraid? He said mildly, no, our women and children are not afraid to die. This so captivated Wesley that when he actually went back to London, he attended a prayer meeting, and that's where he says he first felt the strange warming of a real relationship with Christ. And then he actually went and sailed to Holland, and he met Zinzendorf. And, Wesley, the story has been told of Wesley's impact upon the world. So this just started with a little church getting serious about prayer. That little church was responsible over the next 200 years with sending 3,000 missionaries into the world. So that can happen here, and why not? So I ask you, Providence, do you want more of God? Then let's go into these Zoom rooms and let's pray and ask for more of God. And I think we already have 63 prayer leaders over the 72 hours that have said, hey, I'll take an hour. Let's jump into those rooms. Let's pray with one another. And I think we're going to do it in a bunch of different ways. Everybody has their own style of how they're going to do their hour. But it's really saying, do you want more of God? I think in Acts 4, when they reached out and they prayed, and then God showed up in a miraculous way, and that the picture of the church at the end of Acts 4 was they were loving one another, fellowship with one another, praying with one another, and solving poverty with one another. And it happened because they saw God answer prayer in a significant way. I've got to believe that the God of heaven is looking down upon the world right now and hoping that his people seek him out, and that a fire gets lit that propels something new in our world and in our cities. So let's meet and pray together this week.